15 Black R&B legends who had secret gay relationships. Some of the greatest voices in black music history lived with pressures today's artists can barely imagine. At a time when a single revelation could damage a career, many stars learned to keep parts of their personal lives out of the spotlight. The music was public. The rest was carefully protected. And decades later, some of those hidden stories are only now becoming part of music history. If you enjoy discovering the untold stories behind legendary artists, make sure to subscribe to the Black Excellence for more powerful stories from black music history. Little Richard. The story of American popular music, Little Richard remains one of the most electrifying pioneers of the rock and roll era. Born Richard Wayne Penniman on December 5, 1932, in Macon, Georgia, he grew up in a deeply religious environment where gospel music filled the church every week. Those powerful sounds, combined with the rhythm and blues heard throughout the American South, helped shape the energetic style that would later capture national attention. Everything changed in 1955 when Little Richard recorded Tutti Frutti. With its pounding piano introduction and unforgettable vocal delivery, the song sounded unlike anything most radio listeners had heard before. The record quickly sold more than 1 million copies, launching his career and helping introduce a bold new sound that would soon be recognized worldwide as rock and roll. Over the next few years, he released several influential songs, including Long Tall Sally, Lucille, Rip It Up, and Good Golly Miss Molly. These recordings brought excitement to jukeboxes, radio stations, and dance halls across the country. What made Little Richard especially memorable was his extraordinary stage presence. His performances were filled with energy, expressive piano playing, and a voice capable of shifting from joyful shouts to powerful singing in seconds. Young musicians who watched him perform quickly understood they were witnessing something unique. Artists such as the Beatles, Elton John, Mick Jagger, and Prince later credited him as an important influence on their own musical journeys. At the same time, Little Richard lived during an era when many performers kept personal matters private, especially in the early decades of their careers. In later interviews, he spoke about the challenges of balancing faith, public expectations, and life in the spotlight, experiences that reflected the cultural climate of the time. When you hear the opening piano of Tutti Frutti, does it still bring back memories of the early days of rock and roll? Little Richard's influence continued to be recognized long after his early success. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986 and received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1993. When he passed away in May 2020 at the age of 87, tributes came from musicians around the world who acknowledged his role in shaping the energy and excitement that define rock music today. Luther Vandross. Behind many of the most beloved love songs in R&B history stood the unforgettable voice of Luther Vandross. For decades, his music filled radios, weddings, and quiet evenings across America. Yet, like several artists of his generation, Vandross lived much of his personal life away from public discussion. Born Luther Ronzoni Vandross Jr. on April 20, 1951 in New York City, he grew up surrounded by soul music and church influences that shaped the smooth, emotional vocal style audiences would later recognize instantly. Before becoming a global star, Vandross spent years working behind the scenes in the music industry. During the 1970s, he performed as a background vocalist and arranger for artists such as David Bowie, Diana Ross, and Chaka Khan. His voice appeared on Bowie's 1975 album, Young Americans, giving him valuable studio experience and helping him build connections in the industry. His major breakthrough arrived in 1981 with the release of his debut solo album, Never Too Much. The title track quickly became a favorite among R&B listeners and introduced Vandross as a powerful new voice in soul music. Over the next 2 decades, he recorded a long list of successful albums including Give Me the Reason, Power of Love, and Your Secret Love. By the end of his career, he had sold more than 40 million records worldwide and earned 8 Grammy Awards. While Vandross often sang passionately about romance, he He remained a very private person when it came to his personal life. Throughout his career, he rarely spoke publicly about relationships, and interviews generally focused on his music rather than his private world. In later years, some biographers and music historians discussed how many artists from his era felt pressure to keep personal matters out of the spotlight, especially during the earlier decades of the music industry. In 2003, Vandross released the deeply personal song "Dance with My Father," which went on to win the Grammy Award for Song of the Year in 2004. When he passed away in July 2005 at the age of 54, fans across the world remembered him for the warmth of his voice and the timeless songs that continue to define the golden era of R&B. Tracy Chapman. In the late 1980s, a soft-spoken singer with an acoustic guitar quietly stepped onto the world stage and created one of the most memorable musical moments of the decade. Tracy Chapman, born March 30th, 1964, in Cleveland, Ohio, grew up in a working-class neighborhood where music became an early form of expression. Encouraged by her mother, she received her first guitar as a child and soon began writing songs that reflected everyday life, personal struggle, and social awareness. Unlike many performers who relied on elaborate production, Chapman built her music around simple melodies and thoughtful storytelling. Her life changed dramatically in 1988 with the release of her debut album, Tracy Chapman. The record introduced audiences to her calm voice and powerful songwriting. Its most famous track, "Fast Car," told the story of hope, hardship, and the search for a better life. The song reached the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the album itself sold millions of copies worldwide. The 1989 Grammy Awards, Chapman won 3 major honors, including Best New Artist, establishing her as one of the most respected new voices in popular music. Unlike many celebrities who frequently appeared in tabloids and entertainment headlines, Chapman chose a quieter path. She rarely discussed her personal life in interviews and focused instead on songwriting and live performances. Over the following years, she continued releasing music that resonated with listeners, including the hit "Give Me One Reason," which earned her the Grammy Award for Best Rock Song in 1997. Because Chapman valued privacy, public discussion about her personal relationships remained limited for much of her career. Over time, however, she became recognized as an important cultural figure whose work and identity contributed to broader conversations about representation in music. When you first heard the opening guitar of "Fast Car," did the story in the song remind you of someone you knew? Decades after her breakthrough, Tracy Chapman's music continues to reach new generations. Her songs remain admired for their honesty, emotional depth, and timeless themes, proving that sometimes the most powerful performances come from a single voice, a guitar, and a story that feels real. Johnny Mathis. Many listeners who grew up with classic radio, the voice of Johnny Mathis is instantly recognizable. Smooth, calm, and deeply emotional, his singing helped define the golden age of romantic pop music in America. Born John Royce Mathis on September 30th, 1935 in Gilmer, Texas, he was raised in San Francisco, where his father recognized his natural musical talent early. Encouraged to study voice seriously, Mathis trained in classical technique while also performing locally as a teenager. His recording career began in the mid-1950s after signing with Columbia Records, and success came quickly. In 1957, Mathis released Johnny's Greatest Hits, an album that made music history by remaining on the Billboard charts for more than 400 weeks. Songs such as Chances Are, Misty, and It's Not For Me to Say became timeless favorites, played at weddings, family gatherings, and on radio stations across the country. His warm tone and elegant delivery gave these songs a lasting emotional appeal. Over the decades, Mathis built one of the most remarkable careers in American music. He recorded dozens of albums and sold an estimated over 350 million records worldwide, placing him among the best-selling artists of all time. Unlike many celebrities, however, Mathis generally kept his private life out of public discussion during the early years of his fame. Later in his life, during a 2017 interview with CBS Sunday Morning, Mathis spoke openly about being gay. By that time, he had already spent more than 60 years in the music industry, and his legacy was firmly established through the music that generations of listeners had grown to love. Even today, Johnny Mathis continues to be celebrated for his extraordinary longevity and the timeless quality of his recordings. His voice helped shape the sound of romantic ballads in American popular music, and for many fans, those songs remain deeply connected to memories that span decades. Sylvester James Jr. The peak of the disco era, when dance floors were glowing under mirrored lights and rhythmic beats filled nightclubs across America, one performer stood out with a voice unlike anyone else. That performer was Sylvester James Jr., widely known simply as Sylvester. Born September 6, 1947, in Los Angeles, California, he began singing in church as a child, where gospel music helped shape his powerful vocal control and remarkable falsetto range. In the early 1970s, Sylvester moved to San Francisco, a city that had become a center of artistic freedom and musical experimentation. There, he began performing in theatrical music productions before eventually stepping into the recording studio as a solo artist. His breakthrough arrived in 1978 with the album Step 2. The record featured the electrifying single "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," which quickly became one of the defining songs of the disco movement. The track climbed into the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and soon became a permanent fixture on dance floors across the United States and Europe. What made Sylvester especially notable in music history was not only his voice, but also his openness about his identity. At a time when many entertainers avoided discussing their sexuality publicly, Sylvester was widely recognized as one of the first openly gay artists to achieve mainstream success in popular music. His presence helped give visibility to a community that was rarely represented in the entertainment industry during that period. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Sylvester continued recording and performing for audiences around the world. His concerts were known for their vibrant costumes, energetic performances, and unmistakable voice. Beyond the music itself, he also became known for supporting organizations helping people affected by the growing AIDS crisis during the 1980s. Sylvester passed away on December 16, 1988, at the age of 41, but his influence continues to resonate today. Decades later, his music remains a symbol of freedom, celebration, and the powerful connection between dance music and personal expression. Billy Preston. In the history of modern music, few keyboard players left a mark as memorable as Billy Preston. Born William Everett Preston on September 2, 1946, in Houston, Texas, and raised in Los Angeles, he discovered music through church at a very young age. Gospel choirs and church organs became his first classroom, where he learned how powerful rhythm and emotion could be when played through a keyboard. Preston's extraordinary talent appeared early. At just 10 years old, he performed in the film St. Louis Blues, 1959, alongside gospel legend Mahalia Jackson. As a teenager, he began touring with established performers, including Little Richard, gaining valuable stage experience that shaped his musical confidence. By the 1960s, Preston had already become a respected keyboard player in professional music circles. One of the most remarkable chapters of his career arrived in 1969, when he joined the Beatles during the recording sessions for their album Let It Be. His energetic organ playing added a fresh dimension to the band's sound. In fact, on the single Get Back, the record label credited the track as The Beatles with Billy Preston. This rare recognition led many fans to affectionately nickname him the Fifth Beatle. When you hear the opening groove of Nothing from Nothing, does it instantly take you back to the sound of the 1970s? Preston later achieved major success on his own. His songs Will It Go Round in Circles, 1973, and Nothing from Nothing, 1974, both reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, proving that a keyboard-driven record could dominate popular radio. His playing could also be heard on recordings by artists such as the Rolling Stones, including the well-known track Miss You. Throughout his career, Preston generally kept his personal life out of the public spotlight. In later years, music historians noted that many artists of his era faced pressure to keep private matters away from public discussion. Preston passed away on June 6, 2006, at the age of 59, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most influential keyboard musicians in soul, rock, and gospel music. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The early decades of American music, when gospel songs were expected to remain inside church walls, Sister Rosetta Tharpe quietly changed that tradition. Born Rosetta Newbin on March 20, 1915, in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, she began performing as a child alongside her mother, a traveling missionary and gospel singer. Their ministry took them from one church gathering to another across the South, where young Rosetta developed a remarkable ability to sing while playing guitar with confidence. As her career grew in the 1930s and 1940s, Tharpe brought gospel music to audiences far beyond traditional church settings. She combined spiritual lyrics with rhythmic electric guitar, creating a lively performance style that surprised many listeners at the time. In 1944, her recording "Strange Things Happening Every Day" became widely popular and appeared on the Billboard Race Records chart, marking a rare moment when gospel music reached mainstream listeners. While her musical achievements were well known, aspects of her personal life remained more private during her career. In later years, some historians and biographers discussed evidence suggesting that Tharpe had close relationships with women, something that was rarely spoken about publicly during the mid-20th century. During that era, many performers avoided discussing personal matters openly because of social expectations and the potential impact on their careers. Despite those challenges, Sister Rosetta Tharpe continued touring throughout the 1940s and 1950s, performing for audiences across the United States and Europe. Her guitar style and stage energy would later influence musicians such as Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, and Little Richard, all of whom helped shape the sound of rock and roll. Although she passed away in 1973, recognition of her influence continued to grow. In 2018, Sister Rosetta Tharpe was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, honoring her as a pioneer whose innovative music helped open the door for generations of performers who followed. Frankie Knuckles. Before electronic dance music filled massive festivals around the world, a new sound was quietly taking shape inside Chicago nightclubs. At the center of that movement was Frankie Knuckles, a DJ and producer who would later earn the title Godfather of House Music. Born Francis Warren Nichols Jr. on January 18, 1955, in the Bronx, New York, Knuckles developed a passion for music while growing up in New York's vibrant club scene of the 1970s. His life changed when he moved to Chicago and became the resident DJ at a nightclub called The Warehouse. Night after night, Knuckles experimented with blending disco tracks, drum machines, and extended instrumental sections to keep dancers moving longer on the floor. This innovative style gradually formed a completely new genre. The music played at the Warehouse became known simply as house music, a name taken from the club itself. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Knuckles' influence spread far beyond Chicago. His productions and DJ sets shaped the sound of dance clubs in cities across the United States and Europe. Tracks such as Your Love and Baby Wants to Ride became defining recordings within the house music movement. At the same time, Knuckles worked as a remixer for major artists including Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and Whitney Houston, bringing house music elements into mainstream pop. Unlike many earlier entertainers who kept personal matters private, Knuckles was known within the music community as an openly gay figure whose work helped create inclusive spaces within club culture. The early house scene often brought together diverse audiences who found a sense of freedom and connection through music and dance. Did you ever imagine that the electronic dance music heard today started in small underground clubs decades ago? Frankie Knuckles received major recognition for his contributions, including the Grammy Award for Remixer of the Year in 1998. He passed away on March 31, 2014, at the age of 59, Many musicians and DJs honored him as a pioneer whose creativity helped build the foundation of modern dance music. Today, house music continues to thrive around the world, an enduring legacy that traces directly back to Frankie Knuckles and the groundbreaking sounds he created in Chicago. Dinah Washington. During the golden age of jazz and rhythm and blues, one voice carried a rare combination of strength, elegance, and emotional clarity. That voice belonged to Dinah Washington, a singer whose recordings helped shape American popular music in the 1940s and 1950s. She was born Ruth Lee Jones on August 29, 1924, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and later grew up in Chicago, where gospel music and church performances played an important role in her early life. Singing in church choirs gave her the foundation that would later develop into a powerful and expressive vocal style. Washington's professional career began when she was discovered by bandleader Lionel Hampton in the mid-1940s. Hampton invited her to join his orchestra, and it was during this time that she adopted the stage name Dinah Washington. Her recordings quickly gained attention, especially among rhythm and blues audiences. Throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s, she released numerous songs that appeared on the Billboard R&B charts, earning her the nickname Queen of the Blues. Her ability to move between jazz, blues, and pop made her unique among vocalists of the era. One of the most celebrated moments in her career came in 1959 with the release of What a Difference a Day Makes. The recording highlighted her smooth phrasing and emotional delivery, and it earned her the Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Performance, helping introduce her voice to an even broader audience. While Washington's musical career was widely recognized, her personal life remained complex and largely private during the height of her fame. Like many entertainers of that period, details about personal relationships were rarely discussed publicly, reflecting the cultural expectations of the time. Dinah Washington's life ended tragically early when she passed away on December 14, 1963, at the age of 39. Her influence on vocal jazz and rhythm and blues continues to be felt today. Her recordings remain a reminder of an era when expressive storytelling and powerful voices defined the sound of American music. Ruth Brown. Before Atlantic Records became a powerhouse in music, one singer's voice was already filling jukeboxes across America. Her name was Ruth Brown, and her success helped turn a small record company into a major force in rhythm and blues. Born Ruth Alston Weston on January 12, 1928 in Portsmouth, Virginia, Brown grew up in a religious household where music played an important role. Her father directed the church choir, and as a young girl, she first developed her voice through gospel singing, before eventually moving into the rapidly growing rhythm and blues scene. Her early career nearly ended before it truly began. In 1948, while traveling to New York to pursue singing opportunities, Brown was seriously injured in a car accident. During her recovery, she connected with Atlantic Records, which at the time was still a small, developing label. Soon afterward, she began recording for the company and quickly became one of its most important artists. Breakthrough arrived in 1950 with the release of Teardrops from My Eyes. The song reached #1 on the Billboard R&B chart and stayed there for 11 weeks, becoming one of the biggest rhythm and blues hits of the era. Over the next several years, she followed it with more successful recordings, including 5, 10, 15 Hours, Mama, He Treats Your Daughter Mean, and Lucky Lips. By the mid-1950s, Ruth Brown had become one of the most recognizable voices in R&B, and her records helped Atlantic Records grow into a major label. While her musical achievements were widely celebrated, discussions about Brown's personal life were far less public during her career. Some later biographies and historical discussions have mentioned that she formed close relationships with women during different periods of her life. However, like many entertainers of the 1950s and 1960s, Brown rarely spoke openly about her private relationships in interviews, reflecting the social expectations of that time. For many artists of her generation, separating public success from private life was often a necessary choice. Did you ever imagine that behind some of the biggest R&B hits of the 1950s were personal stories that the public rarely heard? Ruth Brown passed away on November 17, 2006, leaving behind a legacy as one of the foundational voices of rhythm and blues. Billy Strayhorn. The history of American jazz, few composers shaped the sound of a generation as quietly yet profoundly as Billy Strayhorn. Born William Thomas Strayhorn on November 29, 1915 in Dayton, Ohio, and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he developed a deep love for music at an early age. Unlike many jazz musicians who began with improvisation, Strayhorn was formally trained in piano and composition, which allowed him to craft sophisticated arrangements that later became central to big band jazz. Strayhorn's life changed dramatically in 1938 when he met legendary bandleader Duke Ellington. Impressed by his musical talent, Ellington invited the young composer to join his orchestra. This partnership would become one of the most important collaborations in jazz history. Strayhorn wrote and arranged numerous pieces for Ellington's band, including the iconic composition "Take the A Train," which eventually became the orchestra's signature theme. Other works such as "Lush Life," "Chelsea Bridge," and "Something to Live For" further demonstrated his remarkable ability to blend jazz harmony with classical influence. Beyond his musical achievements, Strayhorn's personal life was also notable for its quiet honesty. At a time when many public figures avoided discussing sexuality, Strayhorn was known within his social circle as openly gay, something that was unusual in the American music industry during the 1940s and 1950s. While he rarely spoke publicly about his private life, friends and colleagues recognized that he maintained long-term relationships with men during different periods of his life. Despite often working behind the scenes, Strayhorn's musical influence was immense. His compositions became essential parts of the Ellington Orchestra's repertoire and helped elevate jazz into a more sophisticated form of musical expression. Many historians believe that his arrangements gave the band much of its distinctive sound. Billy Strayhorn passed away on May 31, 1967, at the age of 51. Today, his music remains a cornerstone of jazz history, and his legacy continues to inspire musicians and composers around the world. Meshell Ndegeocello. In the early 1990s, when soul, hip-hop, and jazz were beginning to blend in new ways, Meshell Ndegeocello emerged as one of the most distinctive voices in modern music. Born Michelle Lynn Johnson on August 29, 1968, in Berlin, Germany, and raised in Washington, D.C., she grew up in a household connected to the arts. Her father was a saxophonist. Surrounded by music from an early age, she developed a deep interest in bass guitar, songwriting, and musical experimentation. Ndegeocello gained wider attention in 1993 with her debut album, Plantation Lullabies, released on Madonna's Maverick Records label. The album blended funk, soul, hip-hop, and jazz influences, creating a sound that felt both classic and completely new. Its standout track, If That's Your Boyfriend, He Wasn't Last Night, earned a Grammy nomination and quickly introduced her to audiences who appreciated thoughtful lyrics and innovative musicianship. While her musical style was groundbreaking, Ndegeocello also stood out because she spoke openly about identity and relationships. From the beginning of her career, she was known for addressing themes of sexuality, love, and personal freedom in her songwriting. In interviews during the 1990s, she openly identified as bisexual, something that was still relatively uncommon among mainstream recording artists at the time. Her openness helped bring visibility to LGBTQ voices within contemporary soul and alternative R&B. Did you know that one of the most influential bass players in modern soul music was also one of the first artists of her era to speak openly about her identity? Beyond her debut success, Ndegeocello continued releasing albums that explored new musical directions. Her work often blended elements of funk, jazz, spoken word, and political commentary, earning her critical respect throughout the music industry. Over the years, she has collaborated with artists such as Prince, John Mellencamp, and Chaka Khan, while maintaining a unique artistic voice. Today, Michelle Ndegeocello is widely respected not only as a singer and songwriter, but also as an innovative bassist and producer whose music continues to influence modern soul and alternative R&B. Gladys Bentley. Long before discussions about sexuality became more open in the entertainment world, Gladys Bentley was already known for challenging social expectations. Born August 12, 1907, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she became one of the most distinctive performers of the Harlem Renaissance, a cultural movement that reshaped black music and art in the 1920s and 1930s. Bentley rose to fame after moving to Harlem, New York, where the nightlife scene was thriving with jazz clubs and blues performances. She quickly gained attention not only for her powerful blues voice and piano skills, but also for her unusual stage style. Bentley often performed wearing men's tuxedos, top hats, and tails, something that was highly unconventional for female entertainers at the time. Her performances were lively and theatrical, drawing large crowds to Harlem venues such as Harry Hansberry's Clam House, where she became a regular attraction. During this period, many people in Harlem's nightlife community recognized that Bentley openly expressed attraction to women. In an era when most performers carefully hid their personal lives, Bentley's stage persona and relationships were widely discussed in club circles. Historians later described her as one of the earliest well-known entertainers whose public image challenged traditional gender roles and expectations. Did you ever imagine that nearly a century ago, a blues singer was already challenging social norms on stage? Throughout the 1930s, Bentley recorded blues music and continued performing across the United States. However, changing cultural attitudes and shifts in the entertainment industry eventually reduced her visibility in the national spotlight. She later relocated to Los Angeles, where she continued performing in smaller venues. Although Gladys Bentley passed away in 1960, interest in her story has grown over time. Today, historians recognize her as an important figure of the Harlem Renaissance, not only for her music, but also for the way her public image and personal life challenged the expectations of her era. Labi Siffre. The history of British soul and singer-songwriter music, Labi Siffre stands out not only for his songwriting, but also for the honesty with which he later spoke about identity and personal truth. Born Claudius Afolabi Siffre on June 25, 1945, in London, England, he grew up in a multicultural household with Nigerian and Belgian heritage. Music became a major influence early in his life, and by the late 1960s, he began building a reputation as a thoughtful singer-songwriter whose work blended soul, folk, and pop. Siffre first gained major attention in the early 1970s with songs such as It Must Be Love, released in 1971, which became a successful single in the United Kingdom and later gained even wider recognition when the band Madness recorded a popular cover version in 1981. Another of his most notable recordings was Something Inside So Strong, released in 1987, a powerful song inspired by the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. The track reached the top 5 on the UK singles chart and became one of the most recognized songs of his career. Beyond his music, Siffre also became known for speaking openly about his identity. In interviews later in his life, he discussed being a gay man, something he had not always felt comfortable expressing publicly during the earlier stages of his career. During the 1970s and early 1980s, many performers still faced strong social pressure to keep their personal lives private, especially within the music industry. Another surprising chapter in Siffre's influence appeared years later when the instrumental section from his 1975 track, I Got Thee, was sampled by rapper Eminem in the global hit My Name Is, 1999. That sample introduced Siffre's music to a completely new generation of listeners. Today, Labi Siffre is remembered as both a talented songwriter and a respected voice in discussions about identity, creativity, and authenticity in music. Carl Bean. During the 1970s, when very few artists in mainstream music spoke openly about sexuality, Carl Bean became connected to one of the earliest songs that directly addressed gay identity. Born May 26, 1944, in Baltimore, Maryland, Bean began his musical journey through gospel and soul music, developing a strong voice that would later bring attention to an unusual and groundbreaking recording. In 1977, Bean recorded the song "I Was Born This Way," written by Chris Spearer and Bunny Jones, and released through Motown Records. At a time when LGBTQ themes were rarely heard in popular music, the song delivered a clear message about self-acceptance and identity. The lyrics openly affirmed being gay, making it one of the earliest pride-themed songs recorded by a major label. Though the record did not become a major pop hit on national charts, it gained strong recognition in dance clubs and LGBTQ communities, especially in cities where club culture was closely connected with emerging gay rights movements. Over time, the song developed a lasting cultural reputation and is often described by historians as one of the first openly gay pride anthems in modern popular music. Had you ever heard that a Motown recording from the 1970s carried one of the earliest public messages celebrating gay identity? Carl Bean's life later moved in a different direction beyond music. In 1982, he founded the Unity Fellowship Church movement, a religious organization created to support LGBTQ individuals seeking spiritual community. Through this work, Bean became known not only as a singer, but also as a minister and advocate for acceptance. While his recording career remained relatively brief, the song "I Was Born This Way" continued to influence later generations. The message of the record was referenced decades later in discussions about LGBTQ representation in music and culture. Carl Bean passed away on September 7, 2021, but his name remains closely connected to one of the earliest songs in popular music that openly addressed gay identity and pride. Music these legends created will never fade. Their voices shaped generations, and their songs still echo through history today. But behind the spotlight were lives far more complex than many fans ever realized. In a time when revealing the truth could destroy a career, silence was often the only protection these artists had. Now, decades later, those hidden stories are finally becoming part of music history. But it raises an important question. Should fans separate the artist from their personal life, or does the full story matter when we talk about their legacy? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you thought these stories were surprising, there are many more legends whose private lives remained hidden behind the spotlight. We'll explore those stories in our next video. So make sure you subscribe to the Black Excellence so you don't miss the next chapter in the untold history of Black music.